Everybody, welcome to our monthly webinar. This is a topic and a subject that I'm passionate about. Any of you who have kids or nieces will be passionate about this as well. It's really, how do we educate our kids for the 21st century in a way that is agile, that is really driven by first principle thinking in inventing education versus something that was from the industrial age 200 years ago. And super excited to bring an entrepreneur in a multitude of industries to the table who is really scaling education in a way that I'm excited for you to learn about and honestly for me to learn about. All right, so Jeff, welcome.
Hello, Peter.
Let me do a proper introduction for you. So Jeff Sandefer lives a dual life as an entrepreneur and a teacher. As an entrepreneur, he founded several successful companies, his first at the age of 16. His latest, Sandefer Capital Partners, an oil and gas investment firm with several $1 billion in assets, and I might try and move you towards solar, but we'll talk about that some other time. 15 years ago, Jeff and a group of successful businessmen started Acton School of Business, whose 100-hour-a-week program led the Princeton Review to repeatedly name Acton students as the most competitive MBAs in the nation. That's pretty awesome. In 2010, Jeff and his wife Laura started Acton Academy, a cutting-edge K-12 school that blends a one-room schoolhouse, the Socratic method, and 21st century technology to equip its students to change the world. Acton Academy has over 270 affiliates around the world and over 18,000 applications from parent entrepreneurs, and I love that terminology, but parent entrepreneur, who want to launch a new school. Jeff is a graduate of Harvard Business School, I've heard of it, where he served over the last 20 years on the school's governing committees. So welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I can think of no topic that's more important than reinventing education. And I think most people don't stop to think about how, I call it Baroque and broken K-12 education is. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, for me, this is actually very personal, and we didn't start out to kind of change education. In fact, we're still just serving families. That's the way we look at it. Our two boys were at a Montessori school, and they were about to get old enough to go in traditional school. And I went to see the very best teacher at the very best private school.
How long ago was this, and how old were they?
This was 2010. They were 6 and 7.
Okay.
I went to see this stately man who was this great teacher, and I said, when should we move them to traditional school? And he said, as soon as possible.
Okay.
So, okay, why? And he said, well, because since they've had that kind of freedom, once they've had that, they won't want to be chained to a desk and spoken at for 18 hours a day. And before I could even think, I said, well, I don't blame them. And this wonderful teacher looked at the ground for a long time, and I thought I had offended him. And he looked up and he shook his head and quietly said, I don't either. And so I went home that day and told Laura, I said, we're done with traditional school. The best teacher in this city just told me not to put our children there, our boys there. And so we're going to either start a school or we're going to homeschool, we're going to do something, but we're not going to chain them to a desk. So this act didn't start as an educational reform and it isn't even an educational project now. It's about our children learning. It always has been, always will be.
Yeah, it's interesting. My own personal story, which I've shared with the community before, was when my wife and I, we have two boys who are now 8.5, and when we looked at the communities, the schools here, there was one school that we liked out of everything. And in LA, I mean, it's so competitive. You're starting for K-12 applications when they're like 3 years old, and the tuitions that you're paying are like college tuitions. I mean, you're paying a ridiculous amount of money. And I remember saying, okay, if we'll apply, and getting two boys, white Caucasian boys into a school together at the same time was statistically very difficult to think. And so I backed up and said, okay, I may have to start my own school. They got in, and I still think about what I would do if I started my own school, and clearly you have, and so I'm looking forward to diving in. So again, if you've got kids, if you have nieces, nephews, or kids on the way, how do you want them to learn is a really important question. So, and I wrote a white paper, and if you go to Diamandis.com and you type in education, you can find at least my paper on reinventing how we teach our kids. But let's start with you, Jeff. I mean, if you would, what's the overall principle here
Well, the overall principle on our mission is that each person who enters the door, adult or child, is a genius who deserves to find a calling who will change the world.
Nice.
Genius doesn't mean 180 IQ. It
Yeah.
means having some sort of special talent, whether
Yeah.
you're the best plumber in the world, the best electrician, or the best rocket scientist.
100%.
Yeah, so that's the founding principle. These are really one-room schoolhouses. So they're a throwback to when America became the most prosperous and fair country on the face of the earth with no organized schooling.
And
So it's a throwback to that
what
day.
century would you
That would go back to before like 1865. You know, kind of Civil War was about when the changes came in place. So one-room schoolhouses.
Which means you've got, and give me a description here of age range
Sure.
and number of people in this.
And this is important. So you've got, I mean, again, I said, you know, it's a one-room schoolhouse for the 21st century. So these are 36 multi-age children in one place. 36 in elementary, 36 in middle school, 36 in high school.
And the elementary runs typically
6 years old to 10 or 11.
Okay.
And in the middle school and high school. Now they're all moving together and teaching each other or learning from each other all the time. And that's the magic is, you know, you think about with Airbnb, we share rooms. With Uber, we share cars. Why can't young people share learning? And that's what they do. It's, you know, it's not about being educated. That's what someone does to you. It's about learning with someone who cares. And the whole premise of the school is really the hero's journey. That life is not fair. It's hard.
Yes.
It's every, you know, and that story, of course, goes from Star Wars to, you know, to
I
all the
love
great novels.
Joseph Campbell's
It's
work.
all Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
And it's all about coming up with the idea of heroes don't necessarily win, but they do get back up. A hero always gets back up and walks into the fight. And so from age 6 or 7, they are heroes in their own story, studying other heroes, taking on difficult hands-on challenges. So most of the school, although we use all the latest technology, is really doing things hand-on. You think you're Edison in his Menlo Park lab with a white coat on creating something that is going to be exhibited to the public in 6 weeks, and the clock's ticking.
Yes.
And then you work very hard for 6 weeks, you have a public exhibition, you get a week off, and you start again. So for those of your listeners who are agile this is an agile school.
Nice.
And it runs that way. And the amount of learning that goes on is stunning.
So 36 kids, let's look at the elementary school for the
sure.
moment. How many teachers are implementing the experience of those 36 kids?
So we have no teachers. We call them guides, and that's not just a fancy term. An adult on our campus is not allowed to answer a question for any reason at any time. So a guide is a game maker who is setting up a game, inviting people to play.
I like this more and more every word
so,
you say.
So you're invited to play. There's rules to games, right? And I'm going to tell you the rules before you say you want to play.
Yeah.
We're going to make it a lot of fun because actually most young people don't want to learn. They want to hang out with their friends. But they will work very hard if you make hanging out with their friends, learning part of hanging out. So they, at 36, there's this game they're going to play. The adult's real role is to get out of the way. So it's now to the point where we will go an entire week and no adult will even enter the middle school. The young people run everything. They create their contracts, they create their society. It goes to hell every once in a while. They have to rebuild it, but they are really in charge of the studios.
What time does the day start? 8:30?
They start at 8:30 sharp. Most people get there at 8 because they like to be there early so they have fun.
And is a student nominated to head the day?
Yep. So, well, what will happen is there'll be a launch for 15 minutes, and in the upper schools, almost all the launches are done by we call them Eagles, but by the learners. In the elementary, it might be 50-50 depending on where they are. 15-minute launch, which is a story and a call to adventure. You've got most of the morning doing reading, writing, and math in whatever order you want. It's all self-paced, and you're learning and you're sharing. You'll do some civilization at some point, which are Socratic discussions run by the students themselves with no adults, and they're fascinating. And then the afternoon are these hands-on quests where you feel like you are a historical figure or an imaginary figure trying to build something. And that something is going to culminate in 6 weeks in a public exhibition where it's not parents coming to a science fair. You have to deliver real diagnostic care for medicine. You have to deliver a city that works, that's been wired for electricity. So it's an event for the public.
And so the structure sounds amazing. Yeah. It's like I want to go to school there. But did you boot it up by having kids in the beginning that you said, let's do this, and you shared with them, but now the older kids are replicating what they remember from last year? How did that happen?
This has been going on 10 years. So we now have 22,000 pages of original material, these challenges to share. But it's been built one experiment at a time. And now in 271 labs around the world, 25 countries, people are experimenting every day. So there are rules to the experiments, there are sideboards, they're just like any game, but it's been built one mistake at a time for 10 years.
Amazing. So just for reference, when Jeff speaks about 271 labs, these are 271 Acton schools.
Yeah.
And average, you said about 100 students per in all three segments. And do you start, if I wanted to start one, do I start like K through 6th grade or K through 5, and then we move up?
Great question, because people that have multi-age children sometimes will start an elementary and a middle school, but the preferred route is to start an elementary studio with 5 to 7 families. Yeah. We started with 7 young people. Now we didn't have any plan, right? When we started this, it was just making it up as we went along. But it turns out what happened with us tends to be what's happening with everyone. You start with a small group of committed families, and by the end of the year, you'll have 18, and then you'll have filled up your elementary. And then pretty soon, people are old enough, you need a middle school, and then you fill that up. So they tend to grow. It takes 4 or 5 years to fill up a school because it's growing from a small seed.
How many schools do you bring on per year?
We hope to launch 150 this year.
Wow.
So we have 18,000 applications from parents who want to start.
18,000 applications, 150, that's
so our problem is capacity, not demand. And so we've gotten now to where we can onboard 150. We're pretty tough about who gets in because these founders are important to the whole network.
Is this under a nonprofit or a business?
Well, it's a nonprofit from our side, but people can actually open them either as a nonprofit or a business, and they'll do both. We think of that as more an IRS designation, because you should run nonprofits and for-profits like they were efficiently. Yeah. And so parents, most of them are nonprofits, but people can open them for-profit. And interestingly, you can open one for $20,000, $30,000. We've even had some open for no money where they took parent deposits and used those to launch the schools with, because you can start small.
So what is a typical tuition for one of these, labs?
That's a hard question, because across the network, tuition runs from $3,000 a year to $35,000 a year.
Wow.
And that's up to the particular founder and what they want to charge.
How much want to charge, or how much bells and whistles they have?
A little of both.
I assume real estate varies as part of that equation.
It does.
But you'd mentioned that this can operate at a pretty low cost because we don't have teacher salaries and such.
Yeah. So we believe our model is a little more expensive this now because we're serving the whole network. But we believe that we're at about $4,000 per student per year now. We're confident we could, if we ran it lean, get to $2,500 per student. And an important fact is, just like in the old days, the young people start apprenticeships at age 10 or 11. So if you start to take into account the income from those apprenticeships, which they keep and give that to families, you can get the cost pretty close to zero.
Amazing. So does Acton Academy provide a service to the schools themselves?
As little as we can get away with. We're trying to be, everybody hates headquarters. So we're trying to not be headquarters, and we're trying to put, we've got such powerful owners. I mean, you would know some of the owners. I mean, these are some pretty well-known people, and some people that are not well-known.
And some Abundance 360 members.
Yeah, a lot of your are members, and so they are incredibly capable, and we're doing everything we can to put the power into the network in the hope that Laura and I begin to fade out, and we're not needed, and maybe even someday the network splits. Yeah. Into friendly factions.
Right. You get Darwinian evolution.
Yeah. This is an evolutionary process.
Extraordinary. All right. So I want to talk about some of the elements of a modern day education and such, and what you're driving into it. Yeah. So I heard you say this, and one of the things that was so critical for me was passion-driven learning.
Sure.
And it's to a large degree devoid of our school systems today. It's like, you're going to learn these things and take this test. Yep. So how do you build passion-driven learning into what you're doing?
Well, so I so much believe in it. You hear people say things like, I taught them, but they didn't learn. It's like, well, what does that verb taught mean when they didn't learn? So it's all about learning and wanting to learn. And I guess one of the few things we did right very early on is I started thinking about what is learning about. And I came up with, there's actually 4 questions. And I did a TEDx talk on this 11 years ago and it stayed true. And number 1 question for your life that you care about is, who am I and where am I going?
Sure.
And to me, that's where education lost itself in the 1960s. They forgot that Western civilization question of where I want to head with my life is the most important. So if you don't understand that or care, and that's the hero's journey, right? Mm-hmm. These questions. Then the second question is, what skills must I learn and which one must I master? Because each of us should be really good at something on the pecking order or dominance hierarchy or whatever
versus
you call it.
Everything.
Right.
Yes.
But we got to be good enough at reading, writing, math, and most things. And so which skills should I learn? Which should I master? Number 3, who will affirm me and hold me accountable? And then number 4, how do I prove what I can do? And if you think about this, is the whole model of the school is question 1, who am I, where am I headed? That's the hero's journey. Question 2, which skills must I learn and which one I master? That's really all the new gamified online for helping math and the things you can do that with. And then these hands-on quests, to learn what you want to master in life. Number 3, our model for affirmation and accountability is really Alcoholics Anonymous. It's this idea of mutually shared.
It works.
It's an incredible model.
Incredibly powerful, and it hits all the human needs.
So I'm making you promises, signing covenants, the rules are simple, and
to
building our own society. To my peers.
Yes.
And then number 3, how do I prove when I'm number 4, how do I prove what I can do? The Boy Scouts, and just the idea of badges and being able to, and so those 4 questions are kind of at the core of what we do and the core of the principles, and we've stayed really true to those 4.
That's beautiful. I want to, if I could, I'm going to add some just for all of you. For me, the principles that I had were around passion, again, self-driven, motivation, passion. What is my purpose in life? What is my massively transformative purpose? As a child, I can describe it that way, but for me, it was Apollo and Star Trek that got me started, right? The importance of curiosity. And part of that for me is the mentorship of asking great questions. Yeah. In a world in which you can know anything, anytime, anywhere you want, where Google exists and so forth, it's really the quality of the questions that you ask.
Yes.
Imagination, and we've got all kinds of great Einstein quotes around imagination. Critical thinking, fundamental, like first principle thinking. And then finally I had grit and persistence, not giving up. And I hear all of those things in the mix of what you're saying.
Well, and what we've learned is, in all of this learning, there's a narrative arc. So if you think about, that we have these 6-week sprints, and you have 6 or 7 of them in a year, then we'll always have an overarching question for all 6 or 7. Like this year, it's, does power corrupt?
Amazing.
Now, we're currently in this amazing electricity quest where they are studying the life of Robert Moses, who built New York City, who was a famous power broker, and Jane Jacobs, who wrote that cities should emerge. And the question for that session is, should great cities be planned or should they emerge? And so there's this philosophical tie of great questions, and you can imagine in a guide, if I can't answer a question, all I can do is ask questions. So everything's about asking difficult questions, overarching and philosophical and practical, and letting them take the ball and run with it.
I'm loving this so much. How do you incorporate technology into what you do?
Yeah, it's funny that
and should we?
Well, it's a funny question because technology is both not important in what we do and absolutely necessary. And here's what I mean by that. My friend Sal Khan and Khan Academy. We couldn't do a lot of math things without it. And by the way, these are self-taught young people. They're all going through calculus, the ones that want to go on and care about it. But they can teach themselves math, absolutely. They can teach themselves writing. Technology for those is very helpful because they can do it more quickly and in a self-paced way. Mm-hmm. Technology is absolutely critical when it comes to, I need to look up and study why did Bismarck do something so I can come to have a discussion in these Socratic discussions of civilization. So I want to go off and do some research so I can fight for my side of the battle.
Sure.
So without the internet, you're dead. You have to be able to do research. It's not important in the sense of the secret is always having the tribe, treating each other with respect, And when the tribe breaks down, rebuilding the tribe, it's all about human beings and this thing about curiosity and about wanting to know where you're going in life turns to be more about the community forming. And technology has very little to do with that. The human element's really hard.
Yeah, if you don't get the human element right, it doesn't matter what technology you have. Yeah. I mean, I'm so clear about that. A few other things that I'm just curious. I think about what tools I use today that have given me some modicum of success, and they were not things that I typically learned in school. And so I started writing down those areas here, and one of them is storytelling and communications.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the entrepreneurs who are the best out there are incredible communicators and storytellers and can passionately describe what they believe, why they believe it, and why other people should join them. Yeah. That's part of your modules of what you do?
Well, absolutely. So I'll give you an example. We call genres, whether you're giving a speech or writing a white paper. And so one of our genres is standing in the shoes of the hero and delivering a historical speech. So you might pick Winston Churchill. I might pick Thomas Jefferson. You have to create a speech, dress like Churchill, go to a definitive place.
What age are we in here?
10, age 10.
Wow.
You have to give that speech in Churchill's voice, although it's an original speech, at a particular time and place in London, or wherever Churchill has been at this time. You dress up as Churchill, and in front of 100 people, you have to get up and deliver with no notes this talk. And it's a 10, 11, 12-minute talk. At the same time, outside of that, you're plotting a real trip, a budget trip and a luxury trip to that spot in London. You're setting up hotel rooms, travel. You're learning how to travel, basically.
Wow.
And hopefully someday you can earn the money to actually take the trip. But so you're learning all these real world skills of how to take a trip. And then you have to use Google Earth to video the entire trip without going there to show your little brother who can't come along. So now you're learning how to use Google Earth and you're learning how to use video technology.
Wow.
And that is all in a 6-week sprint at an exhibition.
Wow. Amazing. The other elements that I think for me, and I'd love to see how you explore these, is curiosity and experimentation. But it sounds, we talked about this. This is that persistence and grit. Do you talk about the importance of grit, of not giving up?
Well, I mean, Angela Duckworth and grit is one of our core things. But here's the funny thing: we don't talk about it much at all. There is a challenge in a place you want to get to at the end of this session, or because you want to do something with your life. And grit is when you get back up after getting knocked down. But it's that desire you have personally to get there and the experience of really getting knocked down. We can talk about it all you want.
Yeah.
It's when you're really down, and you've been there.
Oh,
you thought something was going to fail.
I've had many failures in my life.
I mean, it's this tolerance for ambiguity when we're staring at the abyss. And that's where you get before an exhibition where everything's not working, or you're getting to go off on your apprenticeship. And I said our 2 boys are about to start an apprenticeship at SpaceX.
Nice. That's
pretty scary when they're going to move out here at ages 17 and 18 and live for a couple of weeks by themselves, move from Texas here. And so that's pretty scary. It's fun, but now you're going to be inside SpaceX actually doing this.
Maybe they'll come and apprentice for me one of these days.
We would love to have you have one. So anyway, grit is what happens when you get knocked down and get back up, and they get knocked down a lot.
Let's talk about another core, I think, which is super important for this day and age, which is empathy.
Yeah. The way you get judged to get ahead in this system is weekly points, which basically measure how hard you work. So every activity has points, and you get to choose what you do and don't want to do. And the older you get, the more
points are awarded by.
There are a series of challenges, objective challenges you can do, and we can talk in a minute how they get peer reviewed. But that shows how hard you work. You submit badges that are peer reviewed, and so that's how much excellent work you do. The third part is a 360 survey asking all of your studio mates.
Really?
Is Peter warm-hearted and is he tough-minded? With individual comments coaching you. Now, here's the thing. You can't rise up in the studios. Your freedom is set based on how high you are in all 3 of those.
Nice.
So if you do everything right but you're a jerk, you're going to get a lot of warm-hearted and tough-minded feedback, and you might have the least freedom in the studio. You can be a jerk all you want by yourself, right? And as long as you want to choose to be a jerk, we'll love you, and you're going to be, that's where the social empathy and the way they work out things in conflict resolutions. They have processes to work all this out. They learn empathy And look, I've got less empathy than anybody in the world. I'm terrible at empathy. I work hard on it, but I've got naturally none. And so, but I have to learn to be fairly empathetic or I can't get along in the world. So they learn this from running these communities.
That's beautiful. I love that. Another conversation point related, and these are sort of the softer skills, but the ones that are probably more important today than ever, is ethics and morals.
Yeah. Same thing there is, you study the lives of heroes for one thing, and you see them face these tough challenges and sometimes make the wrong decisions. You make wrong decisions. So in the studio, there's a currency called Eagle Bucks, so you can earn those by working hard. If you say there's a contract in the studio, so if you step across the line, you're going to get fined. But if you do something unethical, that's an honor code violation. You go home. You have to come back, apologize to the community, who has to accept your apology for you to come back. 3 times, if you go home 3 times, you can't come back.
Wow.
Now, there's always forgiveness. You can reapply to the school, and maybe you'll be accepted in a week, or maybe it takes a month. But the studio will decide.
You learn quick.
Yeah.
Creativity is probably one of the most important things, and I hear creativity is sort of injected into all of the elements that you're doing.
Yeah.
No.
Well, so right now I told you they're working on this electricity quest. So I'll talk about creativity. They're building a real physical city. And that city has houses and skyscrapers. Each house has a certain number of LEDs in it. And for a certain number of houses, you have to have a grocery store. And this is all built on real cities. I mean, how you really think about city density. You've got to wire all this, and then you and I can argue about oil and gas and solar. You have to pick what fuel you're going to use to power these buildings. The city that is the most dense and the most beautiful with the least power wins. Now, you cannot imagine the creativity that goes into building these cities. And our boys were just arguing about whether they were going to build one that looked like Beijing or, no, it was somewhere in the Arab Emirates. One of them was going to build. But then here's the trick. To win the game, you start out with a team with 4 people in a square about as big as what we're sitting in here. You realize about a third of the way in the game, you have to start combining with other cities. But you wired your city at 9 volts. I wired mine at 12 volts. Uh-oh, we've got a problem. And so you've got to start fitting your city together with all the other cities to begin to win the game. And so my point in all that is, it's creativity born through hands-on learning
Experience.
To do something. Yeah, wanting to win something. Wanting to win an X Prize. Right?
You and I are both entrepreneurs, and I think entrepreneurship is an extraordinarily powerful, overarching skill, and also the ability to sell your ideas in sales. One of the blogs I want to write is a conversation I had a couple of years ago with a group of 20 CEOs, and someone asked, well, where did you start your career? And it was like 90% had sales as one of their core first. So talk about entrepreneurship and sales capabilities.
Well, sure. So as an adjunct to Acton Academy, but separate from it, we have something called the Acton Children's Business Fairs. And I think last year we hit 500 fairs around the world, 26,000 young people. And our family foundation pays for all this, so this is all free. The children come and they set up a business and they sell to strangers for one day. It is the single most powerful experience that anyone has. And if you just learn to make something with your own hands, sell it safely to somebody you don't know and you have spending money left over, to me it's the most powerful experience. So not only do the Acton Academies do that, but we had, I think at our last fair at our home, we had 57 different schools that had young people that had brought people, and it's nothing more complicated than just putting out a card table. I mean, there's no, our only rule is adults may not be involved in any way. If we see an adult helping at all, your child can still take part in the fair, but they can't win. Because it's got, but the sales skills, we work on a lot at the academy, being able to pitch and be able to listen and do great interviews. But the business fair is, I mean, that's where you see the sales skills.
Extraordinary. So where do you want to, what's your long-term goal? I mean, where do you want to go with this? What's your vision? How can this community support you?
Well, I mean, our vision was to start one small elementary school for our children, and then by accident we started a middle school, and then our dear friend Juan Bonifaci, who's one of your members, took a stack of stuff back to Guatemala and started one for his kids, and we figured out 6 months later we were learning more from him than he was from us, We thought maybe we'll have 10 of these. And now there's 271. So this isn't some kind of legacy where we know where it's going.
Yeah.
It's something where the leaders of this community, people like your members, are going to figure out where we all take it together or whether it splits up. And so, our goal is just the stronger owners and founders we attract, the healthier the network, because they're all helping each other all the time. So our goal is to attract more and more people like the GoBundance people, because they make the kind of owners that are going to change the world.
And you said something earlier, which I think is really important, which is you're learning from each other.
Yeah.
And that idea of open sourcing and having the best ideas bubble to the top and then being adopted. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, so there's an owners forum, there's a guides forum, which are our teachers, and then there's a sheepdog forum. I'll come back to that. But the owners forum, while I was waiting 15 minutes outside, 4 ideas came from around the world of how people are changing the model in real time. So this is positive deviance. This is looking for what's working and copying it. So we're seeing from owners all over the world in real time 15 different requests a day, ideas a day of how to change the model.
And is there a published guidebook that you have that when things get to a certain point, is it a vote? People say, let's include that?
We haven't gotten to that yet because it's set up where it's such a lightweight network that people have enormous amounts of freedom. In fact, the way that we judge quality is everyone makes the same 7 promises to their customers.
Which are the students.
Yeah. And here's a crazy idea. Every week you have to go out and survey all your customers with a net promoter score and say, how did we do this week?
Against those 7 promises.
Yeah. And so
what a novel concept.
If you score high, you get to keep the Acton affiliate. If you don't, you don't. And at worst case, you've veered off course. Well, now you've got your own school. It doesn't say Acton on it. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
We don't care. You could try as hard as you could and not create a worse school than the average school, right? And so everything we do is driven off of customer satisfaction based on principles, and that's what keeps the whole place going. So we don't have to have a lot of governance. We just have to have people who want to abide by those principles and are willing to listen to their customers.
I love this so much. You mentioned Sal Khan, who I also know.
Yes.
Are you using the Khan Academy content in your teaching?
We love Khan Academy. We absolutely use it for math. It's the most easily trackable system. Although young people will pick different ways to learn, we track on Khan. In fact, when Sal started Khan Lab School, he used all of our videos to go out and recruit for parents. So, nice. Without Sal Khan, we would not have been able to do what we did in math. We're now, though, talking to Stephen Wolfram and other people. I'm really interested in, how do we get some more of the computational learning? Our daughter just is 23, just got a high-end AI degree. How do we bring in the kinds of math that aren't taught, even in some cases by Khan Academy? How do we bring in the different kinds of thinking that you need mathematically? So we love Khan, it's a great base. We're already thinking about what's 21st century math look beyond that, and computational thinking in other ways.
How much is software programming and game playing part of?
It's part of Quest, so we'll do a robotics quest, we'll do programming quest, they'll build websites that sell. So again, we're always using these tools,
right.
And they're learning how to program and how to think. And in fact, we just had a physics quest, and our 2 sons were arguing in the car going to the movie theater. One of them thought you needed to do everything with simplified questions and computational thinking, and the other one thought you needed to do the hard math. And at the end of the discussion, they decided that the one who's going to be an aeronautical engineer was right, that the real world effects means you needed the complicated equations. And the one who wants to be an industrial engineer could do the simple, more computational thinking. And so the answer is, when you do these quests and they're doing hands-on trying to solve messy problems, they come up with the kinds of theoretical approaches you need to make something work.
Amazing. Let me dive in a little bit on the technology front, because I am curious. And just to be clear, I think everything that you've spoken about so far is the basis for an extraordinary education. Yeah. And on its own, again, with that use of technology. One of the things I find fascinating is the whole psychology of gameplay and game scoring, that in traditional schools you start with 100%, every time you make an error, your grade goes down. And in the gaming world, you start at 0, and every time you learn something, your score goes up.
Yeah.
And I've often thought that, you know, it's ridiculous that we don't use that. How do you think about that?
Well, if you were to watch what we're doing, you would see system upon system, but a lot of them would look like positive psychology. They would look like behavioral economics. So you would see these layers of game making built in, and they do quests in behavioral psychology and behavioral economics. And so, but you would see lots of game making. What we found is everyone's right about all the different ways you motivate human beings: extrinsic, intrinsic, you know, tribe-based. I mean, every managerial theory that we've ever learned is right, but you have to mix them up.
Yeah.
And they're tools to be used, and so they're learning how to use. And the gamification for us is critical, but it's also a series of tools you use, and you have to have different kinds of games to keep the novelty up. It's not a one. I mean, you can't just kind of gamify it and it works. They're playing games all the time.
Testing and grades. Where do you come out in that?
So we take one test every year on our campus. The young people move at
What do you mean on your campus?
Well, because we have one school and there's 270 we don't have, and the other owners are free to do whatever they want.
So they make up their decision about whether.
Yes.
Okay. So at your location, which is where?
Austin, Texas.
Austin.
And we're one of 12 in Austin now. So there's 12 in Austin. There'll soon be, we think, 30. But so we used to give the Stanford 10 test, and now it's kind of out. We use the Iowa test, which is one of the major tests, and the young people move at 2 or 3 grade levels per year. Half of them, the last time we tested in our middle school, came from the bottom 10% of the test scores from public schools. The other group came from the top 1%. Because right, if you're in the middle, everything's okay. You only come if you're bored in the top. 6 months later, you can't tell the difference. Wow. Now, some people are smarter than other people. That's different, right? Mm-hmm. You can tell they have a higher IQ maybe. But if you work hard, a lot of that equalizes. So what happens now is our problem is parents don't want their children tested at all because they don't care. 2/3 of our middle school is tested out of high school, even though a big group came in the bottom of the test scores.
And are you seeing, I mean, so one of the questions I have is college going to be a thing?
No. I can answer that for you. Not at all.
All right, because I think about that for my 8-year-olds, right?
People may go to college, but they're going to hack a degree, or what we're telling people is apply to Stanford, you know, or wherever you want to go, MIT, and when you get in, defer for a year, go get your apprenticeship at SpaceX. If after 3 years you've gotten a lot of promotions and deferred, just tell everybody, hey, I got into MIT, but I was too busy at SpaceX to go. And so we're, you know, or go hack your degree, you know, hack what you need. Because
everything I learned in school was despite the school or at nights or on the weekends. It was the entrepreneurship I did between the cracks at school.
Yeah, well, our oldest son has now gotten in. He applied to 10 schools because I asked him to apply a bunch of. He's now in 9 of 10 colleges, and he's waiting to hear back from Stanford.
Yeah.
The thing is, he doesn't need to go.
Do you see good college admissions historically from your schools?
We haven't had that many because we're so young, but the answer is yes, but I don't consider that a positive necessarily.
I understand that.
I want to make sure we're not playing to that because I'm not sure that matters.
Yeah, well, the old school of the standardized tests and going to college, and it's some game that is being played at a meta level that's no longer valid. So one test of your grades during the course of the year?
Well, so here's the way grades work. There's obviously an example of something you want to write, like a short story by Hemingway, so we know what an excellent looks like. We measure excellence, and excellence is either, if it's the first time you've done it, did you put your heart into it? If it's the second time, was it better than the first time, then it's excellent. If you've reached kind of a level where you've plateaued, you've really gotten good, we're going to compare it against Hemingway, against a master. And if you've won some sort of contest, you know, externally, or you've won some contest in the studio, then it can be excellent by that standard. So basically you have to improve. Your badge is approved by peers. There's 2 peers that would approve it. Now,
I'm sorry, you pick 2 peers in your circle?
Yes. You pick or they're picked, and it depends on how they're doing it. Now, obviously, log rolling starts to happen because Peter's my friend. I want to give him a break. He gives me a break. However, at the end of the session, we ask whose badges should be audited. It's a confidential survey. Now, who do you think knows whose badges should be audited?
Yeah, sure.
Right? They all know. Yeah. We pick 3 or 4 from that list without saying who they are. Then we randomly pick 3 or 4 from that weren't chosen. So we don't know whether we were chosen or not. Then those badges are audited by an audit committee. Now, who gets on the audit committee? Only the tough ones, right? I mean, you don't want to be on audit unless you're tough, because it's not fun. If your badge wasn't of high enough quality, it's rejected. But if I approved it, I lose a badge too.
Nice.
That's 6 weeks worth of work.
This is brilliant stuff.
So our problem is they're too tough on each other. We have to pull them back. But the real secret is if you get a little better at something every 6 weeks, just a little better if you just work on it, by the end of the year, you're actually a really good writer after 1 year. And our middle schoolers they'll write 100 pages of finished product a year. Well, most graduate programs don't write 100 pages. I mean, so they write a lot, but it's all peer reviewed. But there are systems to make sure, because human nature being what it is, we'll mail it in.
I'm tracking a lot of work that's going on in the virtual world right now, and the implication or application of virtual reality on educational systems, and the numbers are pretty staggering in terms of increased memory retention, creativity. Have you given any thought to digital education or VR education?
Well, I think, first off, most of our good ideas technically come from the learners themselves. They'll bring the things to us that are going to work, and whether it's VR or something else. I think community is very important, but obviously with enough bandwidth, in the right kind of VR, you can begin to you and I could be in a room together without being in a room.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be increasingly important. I think they're going to show us how to do it. And the other thing I think is important is, we say it's about learning to learn. So that's going through the reps. Learning to do, it has to be real. And learning to be who I'm going to become. It's not about learning to know. I can Google learning to know. But to your point on VR, if I have to climb Everest for real, that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So if I can learn to do and believe I'm really on Everest, and I can go through the steps of learning, and I can get the skill levels I need, the learn to learn part, which is the processes, then I think VR is going to play a really big role, because it's a faster, cheaper, better way to get real world experience, which is what it's all about.
You mentioned SpaceX. One of the guests I had here back a year and a half ago was the headmaster, if that's the right term, of Ad Astra, which
Josh.
is Josh.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So they have a lot of principles that seem similar to what you're doing at Acton School. Have you spoken with him about what you're up to?
Well, I have. In fact, my sense is, and he would have to tell you this, my sense is that the reason our boys have an apprenticeship, which they got themselves through another Acton, I didn't have anything to do with it, but is that they want to pick their brains about, how to build a high school. We call our high school Launchpad. But they are the two of the people who built all of Acton. And so my sense is that's one of the reasons they're getting the apprenticeship at SpaceX, is there's a little quid pro quo going on about
right. Good. I look forward to
and you know what, we'll probably learn more from them than they do from us. So.
Yeah, and you can get access to the interview I did with Josh. Maybe we'll provide the link for you here. You have a school here in LA?
We have a school. I'm going to mess this up. I know we have one in Venice Beach.
Venice Beach, which is not far.
Well, no, not far away. But we have 15, I believe, in California. And the problem is with 271 and 18,000, and they're bubbling up. So we're adding 3 a week. I lose track of where the new ones are. Oh. So it's actually we have about 12 to 15 in California at this time, and hang on another year and we'll have probably 30. But it's I can't quote where they all are.
Incredible. Well, I'm thrilled for your success, because ultimately you're making incredible learners and doers in the world right now that are no longer just optimized for the industrial, factory line.
But I don't want to give you the sense of this is utopia, because it is very messy. It is very hard. It's particularly hard on parents who can't helicopter or kind of get their young people. And it's hard on them, because we think it's easy to be a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. It's hard. Yeah. And it's hard when you have to be a hero and you have to go through these hard steps. So the whole thing is a giant experiment. It's not utopia. I just don't want your viewers to get the wrong sense. Yeah. It's really hard, and probably...
It's messy but real.
It's messy, and the adults have to grow more than the young people. The young people don't... The adults are the hard part.
And the growth, meaning I don't get... it isn't the way I did it, therefore...
No, the growth is whatever unresolved issues I have in life, I still have a hero's journey myself to go through. And I shouldn't put my kids through my own journey. I should let my children go through their journey, and I should go through my journey, and I should not impose mine upon them because of whatever unresolved issues I have.
Okay.
And that advice, by the way, goes to me too.
Yeah,
right?
I can feel that for myself.
Yeah.
Jeff, I have loved this conversation a lot more than even I anticipated to. So thank you. And one final small question. Dean came in and First Robotics. Do you guys play with them at all?
We do a lot of robotics things. We looked at some of Dean's things. I almost was an investor in Segway a long time ago with Bill Solomon.
Yes.
So. And I can't remember which of his robotics competitions, what we use and don't use. We're about to start a robotics quest in about 3 weeks, and I would have, if I was in the middle of the quest, I would have the answer for it.
Well, anyway, I just think that education is something that we're going to spend a lot more time on this coming year for Abundance 360, and I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you
for all that you and Laura are doing. It's beautiful. Super excited that the demand is there to really scale this. Fantastic. Hope you guys enjoyed this.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll see you soon. Take care.